The Rules Committee will come to order. We are very close, but not quite at a quorum. Here we are at a quorum. The Rules Committee will come to order. Thank you very much, Mr. Hastings, for joining us. We're here for consideration of two measures, the Protect Medical Innovation Act of 2011 and the Legislative Branch Appropriations Act of 2013. We'll begin with the Ways and Means Committee, and we're happy to welcome Mr. Bustani and Mr. Levin and Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Paulson. So please, the four of you would come forward. Without objection, any prepared statement that you have will appear in the record in its entirety, and we will welcome your summary. So, Mr. Bustani, we'll begin with you.
Chairman Dreyer, Ranking Member Slaughter, members of the committee, I'm pleased the Rules Committee is considering the Healthcare Cost Reduction Act. This bill will help Americans by repealing Obamacare's job-killing medical device tax and eliminating President Obama's middle-class tax hike on patients who once used health-related accounts to buy over-the-counter medicine. H.R. 436 also includes a bipartisan provision I introduced with Congressman John Larson. Our provision would help lower health care costs by making it easier for Americans to plan and save for their health care needs using flexible spending arrangements, or FSAs. These accounts allow Americans to set aside pre-tax dollars to pay for rising out-of-pocket medical expenses. About 35 million Americans rely on FSAs, and the median salary of an FSA enrollee is $55,000. Our bill will make FSAs easier to use by reforming the Treasury Department's use or lose policy. This policy discourages enrollment in FSAs by forcing workers to forfeit any of their remaining FSA funds to an employer at the end of the year. H.R. 436 will allow workers to cash out a remaining end-of-year balance of up to $500, treating it as taxable compensation. Patients and families need relief from rising health costs, and FSAs can help tens of millions of more individuals if the so-called use or lose rule were reformed. Now, to pay for the legislation, H.R. 436 includes a bipartisan provision to increase the collection of exchange subsidy overpayments. House Democrats, in effect, used this offset to patch the Medicare physician payments in 2010 and supported it to pay for repeal of Obama's 1099 provision. HHS Secretary described this offset as making it, quote, fairer for all taxpayers. Obamacare fails to adequately protect taxpayers from overpayments of the federal subsidies to purchase health insurance, even in the case of fraud. The law limits the amount of money that can be recouped if recipients receive a greater subsidy than they are entitled to, even if that means keeping thousands of extra dollars in overpayments. Despite some claims, this is not a tax increase or a way to punish those who receive a pay increase. Rather, it's an attempt to ensure those who receive taxpayer-funded subsidies to buy health insurance through exchanges only receive the amount of subsidy they are entitled under law to receive. Successful health reform efforts must begin by lowering costs. Obamacare raised costs while punishing patients who plan and save for their health care needs and taxing small businesses that develop life-saving innovations. I urge my colleagues to stop this damage and support H.R. 436.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bustani. And let's go to Mr. Levin, and then we'll go to the other two sponsors of the bill.
Thank you. Nice to be with you again, Mr.
Always
Chairman.
good to see you.
And with all of your colleagues and with my colleagues. I don't think it will come as a surprise. I very much oppose H.R. 436. And I'd like to focus in on the heart of this bill, which would repeal the medical device tax. It would repeal that 2.3% excise tax, and the projected cost over 10 years is $29 billion. We Democrats very much want more and more access to medical devices. And one of the benefits of healthcare reform is that 30 million plus individuals will be added to the rolls of the insured and have more access to medical devices. So if one wants more access to medical devices for Americans, they should be supportive of health reform and opposed to this provision. When healthcare reform was passed, the groups that supported it were asked to indicate not only their support, but their willingness to help pay for it. Healthcare reform is paid for, unlike a lot of other things that passed here under the majority in the House when I sat on Ways and Means Committee with them and still do. I just want to read the last sentences of that letter. We as stakeholder representatives are committed to doing our part to make reform a reality in order to make the system more affordable and effective for patients and purchasers. We stand ready to work with you to accomplish this goal. The first signature on that letter is the President and CEO of the Advanced Medical Technology Association. So now what is essentially being suggested is to repeal their letter. And that association was just one of a number of health groups that signed this AMA, the American Health Insurance Plans, the Pharmaceutical, Pharma, and the American Hospital Association. So if you take this step and repeal this tax and the commitment of the association, I guess there'll be others coming in and asking the same, which maybe is what those of you who want to repeal the healthcare reform really want, to pull the funding out from under it. I think that would be a serious, serious mistake. When you look at the facts, though sometimes this is prescribed or described as a small business bill that will create jobs, the truth of the matter is it really isn't essentially either. This is not a tax that will be paid anything close to primarily by small businesses. We don't have all the data because the companies don't supply it. But I just want to quote two studies. One that says the 10 largest companies in this subsector would pay 86% of the taxes relating to non-diagnostic devices. So you're essentially talking about large entities, and I have a list of them. And then, according to CRS, the 10 largest companies that manufacture medical devices, the 10 largest, had total company-wide profits on all of their lines of businesses. I'm reading this carefully because this is the data we have, both devices and other products, of $42 billion in 2010 and $48 billion in 2011. And in 2010, these large companies had sales of medical devices of $133 billion. So asking them to, as of next year, pay their fair share, I think is more than fair. It is a myth. Some have said that this is kind of a Band-Aid tax, but I won't read all the exclusions, but it doesn't apply to so many of the smaller devices, and it surely doesn't apply to Band-Aids. It's also been said in the hearing we had, it wasn't repeated because I don't think you wanted to repeat something we could easily devastate. But this is not a tax on producers in the U.S. that gives other country manufacturers a leg up because it applies across the board. So I really think this is a very unwise step. I suppose you'll say, if you're direct about it, that you want to totally do away with Obamacare, you call it. I think the President is proud to have it called that. And this is one step to do it. Just comment briefly on the pay for. A joint tax, their indication is that if you totally eliminate the two-up provisions, we took some of it away, but this would totally eliminate it. It would increase the number of uninsured by 350,000 individuals. And I think that's another unwise step. So I very much oppose this bill, and also I would like to ask the committee to consider a substitute to 436 that's fully paid for, that would provide needed relief to American businesses, real relief to American businesses, and real relief to small businesses. A tax credit for employers that expand their payrolls, and an extension of bonus depreciation, and it is paid for by ending tax benefits for oil companies, the large ones under Section 199. That provision should never have been in 199 in the first place. It was a replacement of assistance to manufacturing in this country, held, you may remember, Mr. Chairman, illegal or violative of WTO obligations, and we put together an alternative, and at the last minute, oil and gas was placed in there. And so I would ask that a substitute be made in order.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for that, Mr. Levin. Thank you for being here. Ms. Jenkins.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I would like to briefly address Section 3 of the bill. Under the Affordable Care Act, if an American wants to use his or her health or flexible savings account to purchase an over-the-counter drug like ibuprofen, cough syrup, or allergy medicine, they need to first receive a prescription from their doctor. Section 3 repeals this provision. This OTC restriction limits consumer choice, increases cost, and puts an additional burden on the medical industry. There has been broad bipartisan and bicameral support for repealing this section. H.R. 436 includes this provision that repeals the restriction, and I look forward to advancing it to the House floor tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just speak real quickly to my legislation, H.R. 436, which is the legislation to repeal the medical device tax. It has 240 co-sponsors. That's bipartisanly supported. This is an excise tax that we are trying to stop before it starts because it is a tax on revenue on these companies, not on profits. And as a result, companies are already cutting back on research and development. They're already laying off employees. This is one of America's best success stories in terms of innovation and producing life-saving and life-improving technologies for patients. And we are putting that in jeopardy. And some estimates say this will have a net hit on the industry of about 10% in the loss of jobs, 43,000 jobs. And some companies are already laying off folks. In particular, it will hurt small businesses. 80% of this industry has 50 employees or less. And because it is a tax on revenue, not on profits, we're making the bar harder and higher for them to become profitable. And it will hit certain states like Minnesota, Massachusetts, North Carolina, California, especially areas that have a strong ecosystem of this industry present. And so for that reason, we're bringing it forward, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to bipartisan support.
Thanks to all of you for being here and appreciate your remarks, and we'll look forward to considering this measure. Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate very much the bill that has been brought before us and the comments made by our colleagues. I want to say to Congresswoman Jenkins, I get an awful lot of letters on the issue that you're bringing to us, and I think it's really important that we do this. We talk about unintended consequences. I think that we have cost the American people a lot of money. We've forced them to go to doctors for things they should be able to buy across the counter. This nanny state that we're creating here is just unbelievable, and so I appreciate that. I appreciate all three of the aspects that we're dealing with. I have one little concern about a comment Mr. Levin made in singling out the people who help so many people in this country by creating devices that make their lives better, and looking at what their sales are, looking at what their profits are, and then saying we want them to pay their fair share. I mean, it's as though, again, the attitude of certain people in the government here is that any money that's created in the private sector is fair game for us to go grab. And that's what I think the American people hear when they hear that kind of a comment. It's as though you're just out there looking for any group that has shown any success whatsoever and saying, how can we justify going and getting that money away from them? It isn't the government's money. It's the money that's created by those people who've risked their own money or risked the shareholders' money. And in almost all cases, they are making the lives of Americans better in some fashion or another. And it really troubles me to hear that kind of a comment. But I'm very supportive of the legislation, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, I get it. I mean, I understand that the majority doesn't like the Affordable Care Act and wants to do everything humanly possible to try to undermine it. I've lost count of how many times we've had bills up here to either to fund it or to outright repeal it, and I get it, and we're going to have that debate, and you're in charge, so you can bring this to the floor, and that's your right. I'd like to go to the issue of Mr. Levin's substitute, and just read it. I want to make sure I get this right. The substitute would substitute the language of the bill for 1, a 10% payroll tax credit for employers that hire new workers or increase existing worker wages, and 2, an extension of bonus depreciation for employers. The substitute is completely offset by limiting Section 199 domestic production deduction and the use of the last in, first out method of inventory accounting for major integrated oil companies. You know, this economy is, you know, hopefully on the road to recovery, but it's awful slow. And part of the reason why I think it's slow is because of the inaction of Congress. Can't get a highway bill passed, put millions of people to work, and no real jobs bills. And this substitute, to me, gives us an opportunity to vote on something to create jobs. And I guess my question to all of you is does anyone have any objection if Mr. Levin has the opportunity to vote on this substitute when we consider your bill? You okay with making Mr. Levin's substitute in order? Mr. Puzzani?
Well, I think that's a decision for the Rules Committee to make. Based on what I've heard, I would oppose the bill.
Does anyone have any objection to? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to do is we're supposed to be in a new era, according to the Speaker of the House, where there's a lot more free-flowing debate and amendments are made in order. Which I think we could have a discussion about whether or not the majority's lived up to this. But here we're just asking for one substitute, and you don't have to vote for it. But I mean, I would like to think that, in the spirit of allowing there to be a free-flowing debate, that we have an opportunity to vote on a jobs bill.
Yeah. I think that's up to the Rules Committee, but I, too, would oppose the bill. I think everything in the bill that's before you has had bipartisan support, even the pay-for. It's come up before us numerous times. There are many things, from what I just heard in the brief explanation, for the substitute that I would not vote for.
Yeah, there have been a lot of initiatives brought up here with bipartisan support that don't make it to the floor. So I'm just trying to give Mr. Levin a little bit wind at his back, so that we can actually you can vote against it.
I think that's a decision for your colleagues to make.
Mr. McGowan, just add, I sent a letter to Chairman Camp, all 4 of us on the Ways and Means Committee, of 10 bills that really relate to jobs. These are 2 of them. that have never been considered by the Ways and Means Committee, and urging that these jobs bills be considered. And I think what's happening is very clear, that unless they change their mind, the majority here does not intend to bring up any of these jobs bills for consideration. And I think in view of the need to continue this recovery, we've had some job increase very significantly, but not significantly enough. There needs to be a straight answer from the majority. Will they bring up jobs bills that we have proposed? And I think your question throws the gauntlet down to your colleagues on the Rules Committee. Why not give us a chance? Vote no. Nobody can argue that the bonus depreciation won't have a better impact in terms of jobs than this legislation. I know a few companies have talked about the jobs that are at stake here. There's no evidence of that except their statements. There's a Bloomberg report that shatters this notion about job loss if medical devices passes. The Joint Tax Committee talks about a slight impact on jobs. But this isn't a jobs bill. And Mrs. Fox, look, it's 10 companies that have the bulk of this. And if you follow through with your comment, we won't tax anything. We tax consumers all the time. And true, we're taxing, if you want to put it, their money. I mean, you carry your if you fulfill your statement, we won't tax anything. I'm not suggesting any unreasonable provision here. These groups made a commitment to help fund the Affordable Care Act, including this association. They have not come forth with a single alternative. If they want, and you're from Massachusetts, you're from a state which has a lot of the technology, and they owe it to everybody here to come up with an alternative. And there's been no single alternative suggested from this association. And by the way, the tax was reduced substantially from what was originally proposed in the Senate Finance Committee to pay for the Affordable Care Act for their portion of it.
Well, I appreciate it. I know with certainty that this bill is going to the floor. The question is whether or not Mr. Levin gets a substitute. And again, I would like to think that we could all, come together and provide whatever necessary waivers that may be necessary to allow him the opportunity, allow the minority the opportunity to be able to have a debate on our priorities. And I just don't see any reason why that's why that's a big deal. Mr. Buzzani, Joe?
Well, I think the bill, H.R. 436, is a bill that will help lower health care costs for Americans and for small businesses. And it's going to, by extension and related to that, it helps promote jobs. And the Rules Committee will have to decide ultimately whether Mr. Levin's substitute would go forward. But let me make a couple of observations. If you repeal the Section 199 deduction on American oil companies, you're basically making U.S. oil companies less competitive than Sinopec, Saudi Aramco, and other companies of that nature. And that's going to hurt American energy security. If you repeal LIFO, you further hurt U.S. American energy producers. Is that in the interest of the United States? At a time when our recession that we've just gone through has really eliminated a lot of jobs. And one of the bright spots, despite the headwinds, has been the U.S. energy sector, which has created jobs and basically played a major role in sustaining what little momentum we've had coming out of this recession. Seems to me we ought to be promoting American energy production and not penalizing it if you want to create jobs.
I would love to have that debate on the House floor. And I've tried, I lost count how many times I've tried here to try to bring to the floor an amendment to repeal some of the benefits and the subsidies and the in the night, in the really fascinating breaks that we give to the oil industry, let's have that debate on the floor whether or not that those benefits should remain in place. You vote against it, and in this House, it's probably going to lose. But I do think that the floor of the House of Representatives should be a place where we ought to be able to debate alternative visions on how we create jobs. And I just was hoping that you'd all say, yeah, Mr. Levin is a colleague, should have the opportunity to have a substitute, but I guess maybe the fix might be in. So I'm not sure whether we'll be able to make Mr. Levin's amendment in order, but I certainly will try to. I will offer it. I thank the gentleman.
Mr. Sessions.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 weeks ago, I had an opportunity to be visited by a man from Dallas, Texas, who has an operation whereby they manufacture medical devices. And I'd like to ask unanimous consent that a letter that he sent me be included in the record.
Without objection, the letter will be included in the record.
The gentleman and I am not going to read the entire letter. It's rather extensive, but I believe in summary it matches up exactly to the exact same argument that is being felt across the country. I'd like to read, if I can, several pieces of that. The gentleman's name is Walter Human from OsteoMed in Addison, Texas. He says, the device tax will not only tax gross product revenues, but my understanding and reading of the bill is that it will also tax the instruments OsteoMed must invest in place into hospitals at no charge, thereby further reducing my company's profit opportunities and forcing expense reductions in other areas in order to achieve the goals of staying in business. Despite increased raw material and labor costs, OsteoMed has been unable to raise product prices over the past several years. It is now equally unlikely to simply pass along the device tax to our customers. He told me point blank, they'll simply lay off people and quit manufacturing. The worst part of it is he's going to keep doing business, but it won't be in the United States. It should be noted that OsteoMed is also aggressively redirecting its business focus to international markets that provide a less cumbersome and lengthy regulatory pathway with revenue streams that are not subject to the medical tax, immediately saving not just 2.3% in the process, but more. The past month, OsteoMed initiated the search for sales managers in China and the Middle East to supplement recent managers hiring in Korea and Italy. Unfortunately, OsteoMed has already started to effectively trade U.S. jobs for overseas positions as a direct result of the medical device tax and other government involvement. As best I can tell you, lady and gentlemen, I travel this country about as much as any member of Congress, and on a regular basis I see the devastating impacts of where this same experiment is taking place in California, Illinois, and New York. And tens of thousands of jobs are being lost from those states to the state of Texas and other places. The problem is when this takes place here in the United States and it impacts Texas companies, they simply move overseas. The last haven of free enterprise, I hope, is not Texas. I'd like to see it be in Massachusetts, which I visited this last week. I'd like it to be in Illinois, where I was at the week before, and the week before that in Oregon, that has the highest unemployment in the country. What we're doing here today makes perfect sense, and I think just last night we received a healthy, fresh dose of reinforcement of knowing that big government is not the answer, and the American people are sick and tired of it. But I believe that the underpinnings of the Obamacare, what's known as the Affordable Act or the Obamacare bill, comes at a huge cost of jobs and employment by Americans in this country. And I would hate to think that we would not, as a Republican Party, want to dissect this bill to make sure, once again, after all, now that we passed it, we know what is in the bill. I yield back my time.
Mr. Hastings. Thank you very much.
Mr. Levin, would you tell me whether or not this tax applies equally to imported and domestic produced devices?
No, it does. You know, when you look at the profits of the medical device companies in this country, to say that they're paying some share of the cost of expanding healthcare insurance to 30 million people and they won't benefit. That's why these groups signed the letter supporting ACA and saying they would pay a share of the cost. So, look, I'm glad these companies are profiting. I'm glad they're here. But if we're going to expand health care insurance beneficial to everybody in this country, there's going to have to be some payment for it. Otherwise, we'll just continue to increase the deficit.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. If they go to China and want to bring something here, they'll pay the tax.
Then there's no logic in them moving largely because of some excise tax that's applicable to all medical devices,
No, if there's profit.
domestically or abroad.
No, maybe they want to do business in China and make their product there. That's fine.
Well,
But they can't bring them back here without paying this tax.
that's correct. Ms. Jenkins, you said that the pay-for was bipartisan. And I'm just curious whether you're talking about a specific provision in the bill or whether you were talking about a previous measure, or were you talking about eliminating the safe harbor entirely, and that being bipartisan?
Increasing the subsidy recapture overpayments, which is the pay-for in this bill, was first proposed or put forward by the Senate Democrats in the 2010 Medicare doc
That's a
fix and extenders.
That's a previous measure that was bipartisan.
Right. It's
Okay.
the same provision, and it passed 409 to 2 in the House in 2010. And it was also the 1099 repealer offset, which passed the House with 76 House Democrats.
I'm instructed that it's not the same, and that's why I asked you the question about whether or not it eliminates the safe harbor entirely. And I don't think that that's all bipartisan. But to solidify the notion, I wish that all of these measures were, quite frankly, bipartisan. But we need not kid ourselves. Almost everything that we do around here is partisan. Mr. Chairman, I ask the unanimous consent to admit the statement of administration policy.
Without objection, it will be in
And
the record.
its last paragraph says, in sum, H.R. 436 would fund tax breaks for industry by raising taxes on middle-class and low-income families. Instead of working together to reduce health care costs, H.R. 436 chooses to refight old political battles over health care. If the President were presented with H.R. 436, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto the bill. And, Mr. Chairman, I'll take up with you and the other members a little bit later about the Republicans at the beginning of this session of Congress indicating that we were going to vote on everything individually. And here we come back here again with 3 pieces of something that are going to be put on the floor. But I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Someday, I think I need to ask our staff if they put an asterisk on some of the minutes that are sent to us or the statements, so I know what the actual topic of discussion will be. I would love to talk about oil at some time here, but you keep bringing it up on medical devices when we need to talk about tall oil at a different stage of the game. So if you can just tell me when we're going to get off topic, I'd appreciate that so I can be prepared in the future. Someday also we'll hear a statement from the administration where they're not threatening to veto something. I'm anxiously looking to that one. It'll eventually happen, I'm sure. Well, we got to get a Senate to pass something to them so they can veto it, can't they? One of the things I would like to do is thank you, Mr. Paulson, for bringing this bill forward. In my district, you've said, you know, the innovations are coming from other places. I'm sorry, I have medical device companies in my business. They create them. I know some of the people who are involved in that, and for those people who are involved in that business, they are friends of mine, Mr. Levin. The chance of losing their jobs is not a slight job loss opportunity for them. That becomes very significant. And what becomes extremely significant is some of these businesses have plants outside of the United States, and the issue is not necessarily what kind of tax you're going to have on imports. The issue is what is the overall cost of developing these devices in the first place. Can they be developed at a cheaper rate and then pay the import tax that's coming in here if they are produced somewhere else that doesn't have the same wages? The only advantage that we actually have in this is to make sure that we can make manufacturing in the United States profitable, where we do have wages and concerns take place. If this tax goes into place, my friends and neighbors, people in my state, will lose their jobs in this device. And I don't care who said it was reasonable and who agreed to pay for it and who was supposed to come up with an alternative. The bottom line is simply, my friends are going to lose their jobs if this silly tax goes into place. There's no purpose for it. There's no reason for it. It is the wrong thing to do. It makes us less competitive. It makes the cost of health care higher for those who are receiving those devices. This is one of the best bills that's ever come forward because we did a mistake when we passed this tax in the first place, and to repeal it now is the correct and proper thing to do. So on behalf of my neighbors in my district, I want to thank you for bringing this bill forward. I look forward to voting for it on the floor, and I can't vote for it fast enough. I would yield to Ms. Fox.
I noticed you said we made a mistake when we passed this bill. I just wondered if you'd like to amend that comment.
All right, I voted against it, like many people did here. But I am using the inclusive we as Congress made a mistake when we actually passed it. Hopefully, we inclusively as Congress can fix that mistake, and I hope it happens very, very soon. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Nugent. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I did not notice that the gentleman from Colorado had just appeared, and just in time, gentleman's recognized.
Okay. I'm happy to yield to the gentleman from Florida if he has any questions. Okay. Go right ahead. Thank you. I just want to ask, now, I know that there's three different bills in this, and I think each of these bills has different segments of support. And my question is why aren't we bringing them up individually and allowing members to be for or against all three of these ideas, which it would seem to me would then have a better chance of passing the Senate, would also have stronger majorities in this body for certain elements of this bill. Why are we putting, or why is it proposed to put several bills together in this in one bill and only give one vote on the entire package? I don't know who there might be responsible for putting them together, or none of you were, but can any of you give a reason as to why these three bills were put together?
I'll accept the responsibility.
Okay.
I believe the Rules Committee has worked very diligently with our schedule. When the minority was in the majority, they asked us to live with them and to move through bills and through an appropriation cycle as best as possible. We believe we're doing that now. We're trying to do this to be effective and efficient, and so I'll accept the responsibility. That's the reason why. We're trying to get our work done. We're trying to make sure that we stick to our schedule. As you know, these last 2 years we have changed the schedule where we're not in Washington 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks in a row. We're in for 2 weeks and gone for one, gone for 2 weeks and gone for one, and it's made an accommodation to the schedule. I believe, still would believe, it's not germane to this hearing, but that we've chosen the right path, and so I will accept the responsibility for that. And I accept the feedback from the gentleman. There may be some disagreement.
Okay. Well, I thank the chair for the explanation. I understand some of the individual sponsors weren't involved with that particular decision. As the chair mentioned, we are not in session next week. We weren't in session 2 weeks ago. There's a number of weeks we're back home. It seems like, again, with topics of this magnitude affecting health care, affecting the budget, even if it required us to be here another couple days next week, it seems like that's a path that would then allow us to debate each of these three bills. And I think they would have potential for stronger bipartisan majorities than putting several things together which different sets of people oppose and support, and puts both Democrats and Republicans in a more difficult position of making up their individual minds, because they might like some bills, they might not like other bills. These three, yes, they all relate in some way to health care, there's no doubt, but they're three very distinct concepts. And I would hope that, the chair might consider, before packaging together additional bills, to, use some of our time that we do have to kind of debate bills on their individual merits in a more open way. I'd be happy to yield to the chair.
I do appreciate the feedback from the gentleman. I hope the gentleman is also noticing that we're taking a good bit of time on amendments through a process that not only I agree with, but that has been discussed for a long period of time. And the gentleman is correct. The schedule is compact. The schedule is difficult, but we're trying to allow to a level of comfort people's ability to debate and make sure that bills are well understood before we vote on them. So I do, once again, appreciate the gentleman's feedback.
Sure.
Chairman,
Sorry, Mr. Levin?
If the gentleman,
very good.
The gentleman
Okay.
can hold on just one moment. Excuse
Yeah.
me, I'm going to take just an extraordinary step here, but ask if anybody has any questions that has not had a chance to ask Mr. Levin any questions, if you have any at this time. Seeing none.
I have a quick question to Mr.
The
Levin,
gentleman
actually.
is-
Did this pay for go through the Ways and Means Committee? So it did not. It bypassed the committee of jurisdiction? And was the first time that you were aware of it here in this bill before Rules Committee today? Is this kind of where it appeared in the last couple of days?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And I just want to ask the chair again why regular order wasn't followed with regard to this particular bill as well. And
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to that, the committee rules do not require pay-fors, but pay-fors are required when we go to the floor.
yeah, and
And that was a discussion in committee.
Sure, and but typically a pay for would come through another committee that it would be referred to. Now, it may be appropriations if you're paying for it by cutting something. It may be Ways and Means if you're paying for it by some tax. But typically there would be some pay for that would come through regular order as well.
Mr. Chairman, we did debate this pay for as part of the reconciliation process. So our committee had full debate on this very pay for.
Which committee? The
Ways and Means.
you did
Yeah.
have debate on the budget as a whole, is what you're saying.
We had a full debate on this very issue as a part of the reconciliation process, maybe last month. So the
Okay.
debate was had.
Okay. Happy to yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I apologize for not looking up and seeing you. Good timing. Mr. Nugent? Gentleman yields. Mr. Scott? Mr. Webster? Thank you very much. I want to thank this panel not only for taking time to be with us today, but would ask if there are any other members that wish to provide any. This panel is excused. Want to see if there are other members who wish to give testimony on the Protect Medical Innovation Act of 2011. Hearing none, we are now closing the hearing for H.R. 436, Protect Medical Information Act of 2011. At this time, I would move the committee to H.R. 5882, appropriations. Yes, sir. Fine. H.R. 5882, appropriations under the Legislative Branch Appropriations Act of 2013. The gentleman's recognized. Without objection. are joined today by several gentlemen. The gentleman on behalf of the subcommittee chairman, Andrew Crenshaw, the gentleman from Florida, the gentleman, Mike Honda, subcommittee ranking member also, and evidently Mr. Flake is expected. When Mr. Flake does arrive, we will add him on to this panel. At this time, we would go ahead and, is Mr. Flake out there at all? Okay, we're going to go ahead and proceed then at this time. Gentleman, Mr. Crenshaw is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the opportunity to present to you the 2013 Legislative Branch Funding Bill. The bill is $3.3 billion, which is 1% less than last year, or $33 million less. It funds all the agencies. We made some tough but workable decisions, and I would urge you to adopt the rule as requested by Chairman Rogers.
Thank you very much. Mr. Honda. Mr. Flake, as a member of the committee, if you would feel free to join us up at the table. Mr. Honda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ranking members and the members of the Rules Committee, and I really appreciate the opportunity to appear before you. As the chair said, that this is a bill that's 1% less than 2012. I understand that the chairman of the full committee requested orderly consideration of this bill by the House, and I support that request. It's probably the smallest appropriation bill that we have, but it funds an equal branch of our government. So I think that we should be looking at this with very, very careful eyes. Even with a lower allocation, Chairman Crenshaw was able to level fund and even increase several areas important to the operation of the ledge branch. The House overall is held flat at $1.22 billion, including $573.9 million for each member's office budgets. That's equal to last year. Also, we have been assured by the clerk's office that there are sufficient prior year funds to pay for the implementation of the Stock Act. I know that is of importance to Ranking Member Slaughter. Chairman Crenshaw should also be applauded for putting the brakes on the trend of decreasing funding for most of the ledge branch agencies. Unfortunately, the protection shown for some agencies this fiscal year could not extend to all. But thanks to the allocation our subcommittee was given, Architect of the Capitol is clear closer to this bill and was cut by 11%, or $52.5 million. The major project that is not funded is the request $61.2 million for the first part of Phase 2 of the Capitol Dome restoration. The dome is a symbol of our nation's democracy, and from afar it looks grand and majestic. And up close, members and visitors will see that the state of disrepair of the cast iron and the impact of the intrusion of moisture. This project should be funded this fiscal year to avoid higher costs in the future. Finally, under the lens of government transparency, I've been a long-time advocate of making bulk legislative data available to the public. I'm glad that the committee report discusses this, and I hope to continue to advance these efforts to speedy implementation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I just appreciate working with Chairman Crenshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Honda. Mr. Flake.
Thank you. Thank you. The Rules Committee saw fit last year during consideration to include in the structured rule an amendment that had to do a limitation amendment with regard to funds, MRA, that are allocated to Internet advertising. I would like to bring that same amendment to the floor this time. So I would appeal to the Rules Committee to make the same judgment they did last year and allow that to come to the floor. This is an issue that is relatively new, just over the past several years. The ability to use MRA for Internet advertising, it's something that the Congress needs to take note of, given the potential for perhaps use of funds that wouldn't be proper. And so I think that considering this amendment is a good move and certainly needed here. And so I just ask that you make the same decision that was made last year and allow it in order. Thanks.
Mr. Flake, thank you, and thank you to the three members of the committee. Mrs. Fox?
Did Mr. Crenshaw say he was not going to speak? And I wasn't listening.
Yeah, that's okay. I believe Mr. Crenshaw did have an opportunity.
Thank you.
Honda, and so the gentlewoman is right.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
As I recall, I think I remember that. Mr. McGovern? All right. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Woodall? Mr. Nugent? Mr. Scott? Mr. Webster? Wow. Thanks to each of you who have taken time to be here on behalf of the committee and the subcommittee, and I appreciate it. This panel is now excused. We have other witnesses. At this time, I believe I see two witnesses who have sought to be recognized. One is the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise. If you'll please come up to the table, and the gentleman, Mr. Gozar, from Arizona. Thank you to each of you. Without objection, any testimony that you have that's written down, we would be pleased to enter into the record. The gentleman, Mr. Scalise, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you and the rest of the Rules Committee. I have an amendment to reduce $1 million the balance of an account in the Open World Leadership Center. This is an account that was used to bring foreign government officials to the United States. There are other types of programs in the State Department and others. This is one of those that we appropriated. And last year, I think it was $12 million. This year, they have reduced it down to $1 million. And the program of bringing government officials back and forth was ended. There's $1 million left for continuing to keep the office running. The feeling was that we are going to eliminate this program, and I think it's something that we ought to do because we don't have the money to keep doing it. Why should we keep the office running? So this reduces by an additional millions throughout the program and use that for deficit reduction.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gozar, welcome to the Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the members of the committee. My amendment is simple. It would reduce the funding to the botanical gardens to the levels approximated in 2009, which equals just a cut of $1.2 million in cuts. Now, I appreciate botanical gardens, and in fact, I am a botanist and feel that we have some fiscal responsibilities that we have to face, and this is one of them. This is one of them that everybody's got to take a haircut. I know that everything is sitting on the line, and I hope that the committee, as we did last year, saw fit to include this in the rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McGovern? Does anyone have, that sits on the committee, a question for, yes, Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just need to ask Mr. Scalise, because I'm not sure I understood his testimony properly. Congress eliminated the program. There's no actual program that goes on, but we have kept $1 million to keep the office open to maintain the program that no longer goes on?
You know, we looked into this, and when they were preparing to zero out the program, they asked the agency how much would it cost to eliminate the program, and the agency said it would cost $1 million to eliminate the program. And so they left $1 million in the fund. I would take exception to that assessment by the agency that it costs us $1 million to get rid of them. But I guess if they wanted to stay around and didn't want to be eliminated, then they just tell you it's going to cost money to eliminate you, so leave $1 million or commit. I don't think we ought to do that. I think if our decision is a policy that we ought to stop this Open World Leadership Center, then we ought to zero it out and close it down. And that means zeroing it out, not giving $1 million to stay around and do that.
And Dr. Gozar, I've supported your amendment in the past, and I look forward to supporting it again. I hope the Rules Committee makes it in order. I love the botanical gardens. I particularly love the Christmas display where they put all the model trains in there. It takes me back. I bring all the young men in my life, through all the nieces, all the nephews, and all the grandchildren from other parts of the family. Everybody come through because it really is a fabulous thing. But I had some constituents in the office just 2 weeks ago who said, you know, Rob, we appreciate the red carpet that Congress has rolled out for us as tourists when we come through here, but we're kind of wondering if you guys are taking the same haircut that the rest of us are taking. We have done that with our MRAs here, but there are lots of these other agencies that we have jurisdiction over. I appreciate your courage in bringing that forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no one else seeking Mr. Polis is not interested in being recognized. I want to thank both of you for coming up and taking time to come to the wonderful Rules Committee today. Well, day's not over with, Mr. Gozar. The day is not over with. This panel is now excused, and I do not see any other members who wish to seek recognition on this bill at this time. So the hearing is now closed on H.R. 5882, Legislative Branch Appropriations for 2013. At this time, the chairman would be in receipt of an amendment and of a motion, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina would be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 436, the Protect Medical Innovation Act of 2011, a closed rule. The rule provides 90 minutes of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 112-23 shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. The rule further provides for consideration of H.R. 5882, Legislative Branch Appropriations Act 2013, under a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate on the bill, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill and provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 2, Rule 21. The rule provides that the chair and ranking minority member or their designees may offer pro forma amendments for the purpose of debate at any time. The rule makes in order only those amendments to H.R. 5882 printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The resolution waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You have now heard Mrs. Fox outline the rule, and that is before the committee. I believe that there has been sufficient discussion about, the gentleman, chairman has returned.
I'm along for the ride here.
Oh, I like these rides. And we have had sufficient discussion this afternoon about not only the bill, but the germaneness of the bill, and we're going to move the rule forward. Gentlemen, wish to be recognized?
Yes, I do. I have an amendment to the rule, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 436 an open rule so that members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor. And I would just say, Mr. Chairman, that this bill, which calls itself the Protect Medical Innovation Act, is actually 4 separate bills combined into one piece of legislation. And even though Speaker Boehner has stated his commitment to handling only one policy issue per bill, this is 4 bills being brought up together. This bill should have an open rule instead of forcing us to take all of it or nothing.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now vote on the McGovern amendment. Is there any discussion about that? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those no?
No.
The noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Dreyer.
I vote no.
Mr. Dreyer, no. Ms. Fox.
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent.
No.
Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Slaughter. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis.
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
The McGovern amendment is not accepted. Gentlemen, wish to be recognized
Yes,
further?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order and give the necessary waivers for the amendment by Representative Levin, number 1, the Small Business Jobs and Tax Relief Act, which would provide a tax credit to small businesses that create jobs or give raises. It would give tax credits to businesses that make investments and help our economy, and repeal tax giveaways for big oil companies. And, Mr. Chairman, I was told that the Republicans actually asked the Democrats to submit a substitute, and we've given you a substitute, but now you're not making an order. I'm curious, is there a reason why this is not being made an order?
Thank you very much. Gentleman's asking about the germaneness issue. This issue is well understood. It is about health care, not about oil. And so it is not germane to the bill, and thus was not made in order.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've been doing a little we've been doing a little research, and I'm not sure if any of my colleagues know how many times the Rules Committee has given special waivers for Republican legislation since opening day. We've counted at least 137 times. You waived the 3-day rule 10 times, you waived Cutco 8 times, you waived germaneness 14 times, and the list goes on. And the pattern today continues. Today alone, you'll be waiving at least 3 House rules. On top of that, your committee print violates the germaneness rule. When we ask for a waiver, you act as if the rules are etched in stone. When a Republican needs a waiver, the rules are etched in sketch. So these statistics expose, I think, a double standard. And, when Republicans' proposals violate the rules of the House, the Rules Committee simply ignores the violations. By the time Democrats ask for the same consideration, apparently the waivers have all run out. So I just point that out because we do have a double standard here, and I would hope that my colleagues would vote to end that double standard and vote to make the Levin Amendment in order.
Well, I thank the gentleman. As we have previously stated, the germaneness of oil to the issue of medical devices and health care in general, and specific to the health care area, is not considered germane, and the gentleman is asking for a vote on his amendment.
I would just say that the gentleman that the Republican proposal on the medical devices is not germane to this bill. So
well, it's certainly not to oil. I would agree with that. Those in favor, is the gentleman seeking a vote?
Yes.
Those in favor of the McGovern amendments say aye.
Aye.
Those no? No. No votes when?
As for recorded vote.
The gentleman seeks a recorded vote. Clerk will seek that tally.
Mr. Dreyer?
No.
Mr. Dreyer, no. Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster? No. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Slaughter? Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Anything for gentleman's
One final amendment, Mr. Chairman. I move to amend the rule to make an order Rules Committee print 112 through 514 as a standalone amendment instead of automatically adopting it, and that it not be protected from the germaneness rule, Clause 7 of Rule 16. And if I may be heard on it, Mr. Chairman, I would simply say that you just finished excluding our alternative, supposedly because it violates some rule of the House, but you're going to turn around and insist that your own proposal gets whatever waivers is necessary. Again, I would point out that since my friends took control of the Congress, you've provided waivers for 137 violations of House rules. And each of these special waivers has been provided for Republican proposal. But when any Democrat asks for the same consideration, waivers become impossible. And again, I I want to complain about that what is obviously a double standard here, and would urge that my colleagues support me.
Further discussion. Those in favor of the Montgomery Amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No.
Ask for a roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will seek roll call.
Mr. Dreyer?
No.
Mr. Dreyer? No. Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop? No. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Webster? No. Mr. Webster? No. Ms. Slaughter? Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman? No.
Oral report.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
Any further amendments? Seeing none, this time we will vote on the amendment by the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor of the Fox amendment will say aye. Motion. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. All those in favor of the motion by the gentlewoman from North Carolina? Aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
The ayes have it.
Ask for roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Roll call vote's been requested. Gentlemen, seek roll call.
Mr. Dreyer? Aye. Mr. Dreyer? Aye. Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox? Aye. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop? Aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Nugent? Aye. Mr. Nugent? Aye. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott? Aye. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster? Aye. Ms. Slaughter? Mr. McGovern? Mr. McGovern? No. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Polis? No. Mr. Polis? No. Mr. Sessions?
Aye.
Mr. Sessions? Aye.
Clerk will report.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
The motion passes for the amendment. The gentleman, Mr. Scott, will handle this for the majority.
And Mr. Polis for the minority.
And Mr. Polis will be handling this for the minority. I would now like to call up H.R. 588. Oh, we're done. That was all in there together. Sure was. Sure was. I see, so that we can advise the minority, we do not expect there to be any other meetings during the week. Anything further from the committee? We will be adjourned.